All right, I started up the recording there. So yeah, we were just talking a little bit about complacency and kind of like when to take action and like sort of non versus like non-action. Um, yeah, I don't know if you want to take it away a bit there on, on that, Rick.
Yeah, exactly. So there are many times we come up into a complication or a situation in our lives where, um, often we've read in spiritual texts or teaching to have an attitude wherein that a dispassionate attitude in order to guard against dukkha. Um, However, the question that has arisen out of this is, so at what point does this non-action turn into simple complacency? How do we know the difference? Is it just a matter of investigation, or is there something more happening? Yeah, because I'm not sure that um, this concept, this idea, is often discussed in contemplative practices, because at the end of the day, from the outside, it looks the same, right? Non-wise non-action versus complacency looks exactly the same. Um, for example, what I was talking about prior to starting the recording was, um, should I allow this company to continue to litter on the porch and just clean it up and shrug my shoulders and say, well, I don't want to get upset about it, so I'll just let them continue to do this to me and others? Or is it better to, in an objective or dispassionate way, take the necessary steps to attempt uh, some sort of stoppage of this, just respectful behavior? Um, so yeah, at what point is it internal? Is it external? So the question that we're posing now is, so um, yeah, what about complacency? What about
Yeah,
complacency? Is
what
that
about
is that a fair criticism in contemplative practices? Yeah.
yeah, and I think that a lot of it does come back to that investigation and like looking, moment to moment. I mean, in a way, sometimes we can even get complacent, with the practice. And that is when things come and, bite us. Is not applying that like right effort and what have you. Um, so there's even there, I think there can sometimes be a complacency, but then when it comes to like actions, in the world, right? It really is, I think, boiling down to um, that looking into it and being like, okay, are we getting, too wrapped up, in this? Or can we use this as a tool to continue to practice, that non-attachment, right? So we can continue from that, place of, caring for as opposed to caring about, right? So if it's like something, within our scope that we can actually, affect, and it's in a positive way, like with that, right? It's like, hey, you know what? This might help out actually going in and investigating like the cause of this whole littering thing and everything that's going around. Again, if that is something that, we can do without getting, mired in the muck of, I must figure this out because it is absolutely like my obligation and I feel terrible when I can't. Rather, it's like, hey, let's solve this mystery. And it might be of benefit, to ourselves and others. And continuing, yeah, to use that as that tool to practice, to check in, to be like, wait a minute, this we are maybe getting a little bit too too involved in this moment. let's take a step back, let's pull back, right? So yeah, I think that's interesting though when it does come to the complacency, and like it could potentially, that could be a criticism that is levied, or it's
Mhm.
like, oh, this is like, laziness. But it really does come down to the situation at hand, and like, do we actually have, an impact? Sometimes non-action really is the most skillful thing. It's just to take a step back and not add to the, fire, if you will. And then sometimes it can be helpful to get involved. But when we get involved, can we still do that from that place of, equanimity? Can we still be content and satisfied if our efforts, go nowhere? Because they might, right? So
Exactly right. Exactly. And I think that's it. Like to and as I mentioned to you earlier, in my instance, I'm trying to treat this as a game, and I'm trying to find the door. And I keep knocking on various doors, and there's been no response on the other side. So rather than getting upset about it, or again taking it personally, it's a matter of continue to knock on the doors patiently, uh, and also see if there are other doors that I haven't thought of yet in order to open this up. Um, and I say this because often it feels as though we um, are asked by society or culture at large to just accept certain things as brute facts. Like, yes, companies are allowed to litter on your porch if they have been paid by advertisers to do so. Whether they call it litter or they call it solicitation, it doesn't really matter. That's whatever words you want to use. It depends on how they throw it down, I suppose. It's whether it's littering or solicitation. But that's just one instance of where, accepting certain things uh, from the powers that be and say, well, the system is just too large, or no one's ever tried to push back in this regard, and to be like undaunted, as in a sense of like, I'm neither angry nor afraid, right? I'm not allowing fear to keep me from trying to locate the lock and open the door. But I'm also not allowing anger to let this quest consume my life. And it's like, I'll get them to stop littering on my porch or die trying.
yeah.
Right. So once again, we're looking at a balance to be struck, because I mean, we're still talking about floating above and beyond the hindrances, or dukkha, as it were, but still acting in the world with the intention of uh, making a positive difference. And what that ends up being is like avoiding suffering in some kind of way,
Mm.
right? Because if I'm able to say, oh, here's how I did it, I can let others know, okay, if you don't like this behavior because it doesn't respect the boundaries that society says that we're entitled to, then here's the secret formula that worked for me, and we pass that along to you. So yeah.
Now I'm just imagining like on the side of a website, there's the ad and it's like lawn solicitors hate him. He's cracked the code on how to get it to stop.
Oh yeah, right. I mean, what would the hindrance of ill will bring me to do? It
Uh,
would bring me to gather the litter, go
mhm,
to their office, and then dump it in front of their building, and
mhm.
say, okay, but that's Hammurabi, right? That's an eye for an eye. And of course, there's a part of you, it's a part of all of us that would enjoy that momentary, rush of, I got you back, you know. But for me, it's not
Yeah.
really about that. Although it's amusing to think about for a moment. But yeah, it's not really about that. It's about seeing if there, in this case, is a way to not just shrug my shoulders and say, well, that's just the way it is. The system's too big. You know, no one else is taking any action. So why would I? Why should I? It's more of the sense of, no, I can be, I can take action in a wise manner without attaching myself to the outcome, but also in more of a fun way to see, let's see if I can get this to work. Let's see if I can get this to work. Kind of like a mechanic trying to fix a car, right? Like, it's like the engine is, you know, is without will, you know. So too, I have to look at it like, maybe this company is, even though I know it is without will, but let's still see if I can get it to work within the system. So yeah. So that's what I had to say about that. Is this an interesting, you know, it's a small thing. It's a small thing, but you know, we know that small things reveal like much larger things, right?
Absolutely.
It's like, it's a microcosm, but it's a way to understand the macrocosm, is what I'm saying, right? Because it's in these individual instances and these individual instances and experiences that reveal a lot about the way that we act and interact as a society, within a city, as neighbors, as, you know, tax-paying citizens, what have you, whatever role we're plastering over this thing, you know. And so, you know, and you're right. I think you're right, DJ. It's not, there's no rule of thumb here. It's case by case.
Yeah.
And it has to be taken that way because the sankharas are going to be different for each situation. We can't make a blanket statement about, oh, okay, well, clearly in this case, you're too angry about it, so you should take a more of a non-action approach, versus, oh, no, in this case, every time you're complacent, you should be moved to action, but not moved by any of the hindrances, right?
Yeah. Yeah, precisely so. Yeah. But I think that it's, you know, it's really cool to hear that from you, and like this story, you know, of you know, treating it like a game, treating it like a mystery, and then also with that continuing to practice, continuing to look, you know, into your own emotional structure and seeing the reactions to that. And you know, in that sense, there's also growth and cultivation. And regardless of what happens, you know, if you do break through and you get them to stop, or you know, something comes up and you know, it has to be dropped, or what have you, even then, it's not like there's a real loss because you're continuing to develop and cultivate, right? So that's sort of the really beautiful thing with this. So yeah, I think that if, you know, practiced in a skillful way, um, you know, the Dhamma, it doesn't actually lead so much to complacency. It might actually lead one to take more action because, in a sense, there is not that feeling of loss. There isn't that feeling of, oh, I'm going to do this, but there's no point. It's going to be fruitless. We might just do things for, you know, in a way we recognize the beauty in for doing them for the sake of doing them, but also those good deeds, right? We do the skillful things in that regard, right? So it's going to aim in that direction. If you kind of understand, yeah, what I'm saying there.
Well, again, I think the complacency could sometimes come from like a defeatism or a fatalism. Like, oh, that's just the way it is. And again, there could be a few reasons why people choose to take non-action under the guise of wisdom, and say, oh, it's not wise to get involved. It's not. But is it fear? Is it laziness? You know, where is it coming from? And it's almost like The non-action could be investigated as much as the action, right? Or rather, the motivation for the non-action could also be, because then, you know, how often do we have this assumption given to us by our own foolish misinterpretations of, let's say, sutras or whatever, you know, of which is better. Well, non-action is better than action. No, it's about the motivation. What led us to the action versus what led us to the non-action, right? It's always goes back to the motivation. Yeah, absolutely. That's the key. It's not like non-action is somehow safe and beyond reproach, because you know you can put your mask of wisdom in front of it and say, oh, that's why I'm not doing that, because I don't, you know, I'm showing how non-attached I am. That's
Yeah.
back to spiritual ornamentation, isn't it?
Hmm.
That's right,
Yeah.
back to spiritual ornamentation. So, you know, investigation means investigation, not just to the, you know, what pulls us to non-action versus what pulls us to action. There are forces at play, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think with that too, it really brings up the sense of, you know, being able to be comfortable with some of those boundaries, in the sense of, you know, being open, you know, being understanding, being kind, but also not being a doormat, right? Because that doesn't help, you know, anyone. And if somebody is actually overstepping in a way, you know, and you're kind of just like, okay, well, I'm not gonna, I have to say nothing. I have to be completely, you know, I can't,
Exactly,
yeah.
right, right. And isn't that so often like the popular Western interpretation of a Buddhist is a kind of a doormat, right?
Yeah.
Of, oh, okay, well, you know, homeboy or homegirl's not going to do anything because they're bound by their, you know, wisdom and non-action to just sit there, literally, figuratively and literally sit there, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why so often this complacency criticism gets levied against the contemplative practices is, it becomes a cycle in a way, right? You know,
Hmm.
definitely it becomes a type of a cycle. So, but yeah, I guess what we're discussing here, or what we're coming to the understanding about, is it's just as important to investigate the non-action as it is the action. That neither are safe, in a sense, or neither are um, outside of the realm of taking apart and understanding the base motivations behind them. You know.
Yeah, no, yeah, because it really does come back to like just keep investigating, keep looking. Like when we think like, oh, there is this solid sort of thing, either action or non-action, you know, that's completely 100% safe, like all of the time, right? It's like, no, what is safe is the continued investigation. What is safe is the continued looking and discerning from a place of wisdom,
Right, or the
which is
continued
updating,
sate.
because
Right.
yeah, things are changing, right? So, you know, depending on the circumstances. And like, yeah, no, we could say, well, you know, if you're in a really dangerous situation, right, what's better? You know, you stay in the dangerous situation, or you move to a place that is, you know, safe. So, I mean, this is part of the reason why it's so powerful to get into seclusion, you know, and to get into a safe, secure place so that we can actually talk ourselves and work with that, because that's the truth. We are actually safe. But when we're in a situation which is a little bit more dangerous, you know, sometimes it's better, you know, and I mean, really, where we live, that is not going to be so much the case, right?
Yeah,
But to be aware of that and to do what
that's
you
right.
can to move out of that situation, you know. So there is that. But kind of going back to, yeah, when it comes to talking, you know, with people, and what have you, is that whole, you know, not having to be a doormat, right? Not having to just, you know, you can say some things back, you know, but it can come from a place of non-ill will. It can come from a place of, compassion and love and kindness, because again, you're not doing that person a service. If they're coming and attacking with like ill will and what have you, ill will is, it is not a pleasant thing. It's not satisfying, right? So again, if we can work with that in terms of being able to communicate and kind of walk out of it, that can be helpful. And though there is one thing I would like to add, though, because sometimes, though, if we do have a rule like, oh no, you shouldn't be a doormat, you have to, stand up for yourself, you're bad if you don't stand up for yourself, that can also, I think, sometimes come to bite. So it's to continue to investigate that, right? Because there can be going back and going into a swirling pool of regret, and you need to go and fix all the problems, in the world. And that is not the case, because you can't. But what you can do is look at your environment moment to moment and, make a wholesome change, right? And sometimes, though, that might be nothing, that might be non-action. There's times to just sit in seclusion and take that in and enjoy that, because that can be a benefit to yourself, enormous benefit to yourself and others, right? But then there is times to, get out into the world and engage with that in a wholesome and positive way, and do good deeds, and that can be enjoyable and satisfactory also. So yeah, just yeah, I just wanted to touch a little bit on that, because that has also been something that I've kind of noticed, within my own mind, though, is sometimes it'll be like, well, why didn't you say this and that to that person, right? And so being able to brush that off, or to kind of change that and be like, no, that's okay too, right? But maybe in the future, hey, we'll say something, right? We don't have to be a doormat, but we also don't have to go completely like the other way. We don't have to make a rule anyway. It's coming back and being like, okay, you know what? We are okay, the way that we are, right? And not going into that that kind of strict rule set. You know what I mean? I think that's very, very helpful, at least from my own experience.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, and then again, we find this shifting dynamic balance, right? About and of course, language is limited, and we once again find ourselves, at its mercy often, interacting, but yeah, it's important to find the balance between making sure that boundaries are respected, but not necessarily having to prove a point, because that's going back to ego again and saying, okay, well, this is wrong that you treat me this way. It's like there's that division of I and you and I and you, rather than saying this behavior can easily cause suffering amongst a number of people, right? This body included, and therefore considerations could be made. That, yeah, just gently, exactly, yeah.
And like kind of going beyond yourself in that, and looking at it like, no, it's, these actions, they can lead to suffering, dissatisfaction, so the actions are unskillful, at least within that context. We can say, okay, that's unskillful, right, or unwholesome. And so it's kind of going also beyond beyond the people, beyond the individuals, which can be very helpful sometimes in terms of coming back to a place of non-ill will, right? Because we also, of solidification, somebody does something 2 years ago or whatever, and you go back on that and you say, oh well, they did this to me and all that stuff, and you have this built up image of them, but you're not able to see the change or the dynamics and how they might have changed because you've
That's right.
solidified them. Yeah. So coming back to like actions, like, okay, these actions are unskillful, and not so much solidifying an individual with that. And I mean, that's helpful too. Again, it's like when looking at the thoughts. It's also so helpful to kind of take that step back and be like, okay, well, this thought in this context right now is wholesome or unwholesome. It's not that, oh, I'm super bad because I've had this thought. It's like, no, the thought is simply a thought. It arises and comes up and all that, right? But it's a kind of this objective way, detached way of looking at, one's own thoughts and the actions, and then just simply coming to a point of discernment.
Exactly. Like, I didn't get into a negative
Yeah.
spiral when I felt a momentary flash of anger at the litter on the porch. And any thoughts that followed, I just accepted the fact that, okay, this is these are emotions and thoughts that are as a reaction to this. Let's find a way to skillfully calm down and think about this more objectively without going back and saying, well, I've been meditating for decades. This should never have entered. That's also not very wise, because
Yeah.
then it's like negative on top of negative. That's holding myself up to a kind of standard that's very unrealistic. And just going and saying, nope, the thought arose and passed away, as all of them do. It
Yeah.
arose and passed away, and it's okay. The more I dwell on the thought I shouldn't have had, the more I'm clinging to it, which is completely counterproductive. The
Hmm.
point is to not cling to it,
Yeah.
to let it go, let the fish
Yeah.
keep swimming.
It's just like, okay, yeah, a thought, it comes up, and then it's like, oh, wait, that wasn't, that's not helpful. I don't have to listen to it. It's like the idea sometimes that, we have to listen to every single thought that we have because it's us, that's like not helpful. But being able to just see, oh, yeah, that line of thinking is not going to be helpful. It's not going to lead to, my well-being. It's not going to lead to anybody's well-being, and that's okay. It's okay for that thought to come up there, but then it'll cease, and
It's
we'll just
okay for
say,
that thought to exist and
yeah.
then not exist, and both
Yeah,
are
exactly.
fine. And it wasn't like it drove me to an action that created more dukkha, or thoughts that created more dukkha. It was, if anything, it might have, the thought may have, or the feeling may have inspired me into this line of investigation.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
which case, then we have to take a Taoist view and say, oh, how do you know what's good and what's bad? Because the good can lead to the bad, which can lead to the good, which it's a never-ending string. Where do you cut it off? Where,
Yeah, yeah.
it's from that limited, like, okay, this line of it, this segment appears to be, full of misfortune, and this line of it appears to be full of fortune. But there's causes and effects prior to that and beyond that, that one can judge as positive or negative, based on the time and place and perspective. In which
Yeah.
case, then we're we're once again we're looking with a very limited view, uh, as far as that goes, and say, oh, yeah, because the self is coming up and saying, oh, that thought was bad, we shouldn't have, and says, oh, the self is now coming up and saying what we
Yeah.
shouldn't do.
Yeah.
uh, this is like this never-ending referential
Yeah.
of what we shouldn't, and then we're back into the ego trying to control stuff. So yeah, it's
I
not
should I shouldn't have those thoughts of of
I shouldn't have those
my
thoughts
thoughts.
about not having those thoughts.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Precisely. So it can get into kind of a weird, yeah,
A
feedback
weird
loop.
feedback loop. Yeah, it's a bit never ending. Instead of just going back to the breath, like, wait a second, we can just pull ourselves right back into
Yeah.
the sensation of the inhale and the exhale, the sati of the moment, the
That
sensation, this and that. So
Yeah, coming back to the breath as that anchor, as that pulse of wakefulness is very powerful for that, you know, like it is, yeah, that is why it's so helpful to work with that and just, because it's just coming back to this and then resetting and being able to look at what is happening now as opposed to, following, old data and just being able to drop that. I was going to say, though, in terms of the thoughts, like that is, though, why I do like just coming back when I notice, hey, and discern, well, that thought was unwholesome, rather than continuing the chastising or I shouldn't think or what have you. I just go, okay, congratulations for discerning, like, okay, congratulations for saying that was an unwholesome thought,
Right. And let's
a little
celebrate with
that.
a
Yeah,
let's celebrate with a nice, enjoyable breath.
precisely. Yeah, no, it's like congratulations, inhale that, all right, cool, and that's just it. Yeah, celebrate with the breath there. That's really, yeah, that gets it. There is such a feeling of like, sometimes if the mind does wander or whatever, when we do wake up and we return back, it feels like coming back home. It's like, okay, we come back home to this, and that's what that does when it's really trained with the breath. It's like, okay, cool. And oh, isn't it relieving that we can just drop those trains of thought? We don't have to hold on to that. We don't have to, get to the bottom of it all the time. We can just drop it. But at the same time, this is kind of me going back to what we were talking about, complacency. Sometimes, though, we can kind of have that level of focus on certain things and come back to it. But then at the same time, we can continue to investigate. Is this actually still skillful? Is this still helpful? Is this ruining, dinner with my wife because I'm thinking about, the litter on the the porch or, the porch or what have you? Or can I drop that, come back and enjoy this moment, right? And then when the time comes, we're going to deal with that. We're going to care for it, right? Rather than carrying it around with us, you know, caring about it, carrying it. Yeah, so it's like that distinction, because like, yeah, sometimes there really just is absolutely no point in like so much planning, so much rumination, right? So being able to know where you're at and then enjoy that and just be aware, situationally aware.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. So we hit around complacency today.
Yeah, no, it's been a good conversation. And yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Yeah, sometimes these concepts arise and like, wow, it's easy to overlook that one because it's hiding. Complacency is hiding a little bit. It feels like, the juicier, lower hanging fruit of these kinds of chit chats are more like anger and self doubt and judgments and but this one is the complacency is a sneaky one because it's kind of hiding a little bit behind other ones. And so it's good to like winnow it out and like, okay, let's look at you, complacency. Let's see what you're doing. Let's see how you fit into this mess. Kind of pull that string and follow it. Um, yeah, yeah. So it's good to reach a little higher sometimes and tug on a string that's not one of the easy ones, right? It's pretty
Yeah.
high. It's pretty high. It's pretty high. But yet it's still very, very relevant. It's very, very present, especially for those well, for everyone, but I'm thinking for those who have practiced a bit and have, are steeped in certain traditions and, it's, it doesn't have an easy pat answer,
Mhm.
and yeah, it's a good one it's a good one to it's a tough shell to crack. So it's good that we did a little knocking
Little
today.
crack.
A little cracking today. A little cracking. Yeah,
A little
yeah.
investigating,
A little
and I mean,
investigating.
yeah. But I mean,
Mhm.
like, even, getting on, the calls, talking about Dhamma, like, that is something that is helpful, and it is sort of, in a way, that action, which, when it comes to practice, does lead away from, complacency in that regard, because, again, it can still come up. That can be something, I think, that, it's bitten me several times. you know, Whoever that is. But it'll bite. And so it's to continue to practice, continue to wake up, look, you know, make that change. And I think that's where, even talking about those things like doubts and, ill will and all that stuff, that can sometimes stem from a place of complacency. Well, I've done this a bunch of times, I'm a master meditator. I don't need to do this anymore, right? And then next thing you know, here comes the truck of dukkha, and you just get hit by it, because you're not looking. So it's that continued wake up, look,
Or like
yeah.
to have your default as, oh well, non-action or just sitting is going to fix all this, so I'm going to do that. But yet you're failing to shine the light in that corner too.
Yeah,
So it's like,
yeah,
oh, okay, well, this is my home base. I know it. So it's like, oh, not so fast. Not so fast. Let's look there too, because there are plenty of dark corners in the non-action side of the room as well. That if you investigate, you'll see, wow, there's a lot of dukkha or hindrance that's sitting in that corner that is just sort of quietly unnoticed because we're so focused on the dukkha that comes from action. You know, that's the other side of it. And it's like, no, existence in both its action and non-action forms, existence itself. So yeah.
yeah.
All right, DJ. Well, I think I'm going to sign off here, but it was nice to chit chat with you for a bit, and I
That
I'll
was
keep you updated on my flyer
yeah,
situation and see if my equanimity can overcome their complacency. Okay.
yeah. Thank you for sharing your story. Yeah, no.
All right,
All
Jason.
right.
Bye bye.
Bye.